Hello, and welcome to CatalystMLM. I'm Brian Switchko, and today on the show we have Dr. Hale Pringle. Dr. Hale went to the University of Florida, go Gators, and eventually achieved a doctorate in education administration and research. That prepared him to be a lifelong educator while also acquiring the ability to analyze systems and figure out what made them tick. He served in the Army, on a school board, a social service agency, and various educational institutions. And with his job ripped away from him, he discovered and mastered internet marketing and attraction marketing through network marketing. So he became a marketer. He teaches people the same mastery every day and is on to do some of the same. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, glad to be here. Go Gators.
My parents are going to love this episode. So tell me, you got into University of Florida and, kind of went towards the educational field, but tell me more about like the teenage you, what were you thinking when you were getting into college?
I was in the band all through my teenage years and tennis and whatever, and really didn't think a whole lot about college. In the 60s, it was kind of assumed I was going, but I grew up 80 miles from the University of Florida and didn't really know that much about it. And we really didn't have the heavy sports TV, all the stuff, all the games or broadcasts that we do today. But the funny thing that you will appreciate was I graduated high school in like June, and my mother, we knew we were going to Gainesville. I'd been accepted. My mother came in and said, well, what are you planning to do this summer? I said, well, I'm just going to bum around and have a good time until the fall. So that's what I thought. I registered you for the summer term. You leave in 3 days. Say what? And 3 days later, I was a Gator.
Well played, Mom.
Yes, well played, Mom. So not the way you normally not the way she normally dealt with me, but it worked.
Yeah. So what was your focus then? Like, did you have a degree? Did you have a focus of I really enjoy this? And
at the time, this was the whole science oriented, the Cape. We're going to go to the moon, Cold War, those types of things. I was going into engineering, and I took a couple of real heavy courses in engineering and decided that I needed to get out before they got me out. So I ended up with a degree in psychology. Then I got a fellowship to go on to a master's and a doctorate, and the Army got in the way of that, and it was in that era. And came back in the GI Bill. There was a group in Orlando driving a bus up once a week to get a degree, and I took part in that, and we were eventually down to just a couple of station wagons. But it actually turned out really, really well, because we were all taking the same classes together, and we really became a force to be reckoned with, because if the professor wasn't ready, we drove 2.5 hours up here. We're driving 2.5 hours home. What do you mean we're just going to sit around and chat today?
Like the teachers would show up late for class.
Oh, yeah. We ended up having deans and visiting professors and whatever, because if one of us complained, either the group would support them,
right,
or shut them down and say, no, this guy's doing a good job. It's a hard topic. Yeah, we're all a little confused. But if it was, we're just going to have a good time this semester, it's like, no, we're here to work. We're all professionals. We're all in the education field. So I was working for the school board at that time, the Orange County School Board. And so it turned into a good degree in terms of we worked hard in every class.
Yeah. And what did that teach you about organizing a group? A lot of people have similar experiences in college where they, head of a school group, whatever it may be, but that's a little more extreme.
It was we didn't really realize it for a while, and then we had some nice discussions over in the coffee shop type of thing that we really were. You're so used to going to class and a couple people, but the next semester you go to another class and a couple of people. But here it was always the same group, and we began to really understand our strengths, our weaknesses, and become a cohesive, a powerful group that the College of Education definitely knew who we were and where we were and what we were doing. The other thing that was very interesting, which I'd never heard before and I haven't heard since, when I was working on my doctorate, my major professor sat me down one day and he says, you students have got it all wrong when it comes to working on a doctorate. Says bachelor's and master's, it's a matter of jumping through the hoops.
Right.
We give you this many courses, you have to take 2 of these, 8 of those, and whatever. At this level, you're coming out of here with a degree from the University of Florida, Department of Educational Administration. The question is, I'm your major professor, do I want my name on your forehead? So that's the hoop you have to jump through.
Right. Because
you're going to be representing me in this department if you go out and become superintendent for a school district and it's a totally different kind of hoop.
Yeah.
If you're doing what we want you to do and you're satisfying me, I feel like you'll be a good representative, you'll graduate. If you don't, then we got problems.
Yeah, and it's I think a completely opposite hoop because bachelor's and master's are more quantifiable, grades, tests, so on and so forth, but that's more of an emotional, like, do I feel that you're going to do well at that?
Exactly. I mean, we had one student who was making good grades, and we had a course in what they call community power studies, and the example that I remember so vividly was you have a little town, and Mr. Green owns the town. The factory where everybody works, he owns. Main Street, everybody leases from him. His family's been there forever. And if you're a school board and you want a bond issue, you get Mr. Green's on board. Because if you don't, it's not going to pass. And at the end of the class or the example, this student stood up and said, well, that was very interesting, but you wouldn't expect us to really use that kind of thing, would you, in real life? And it was like everybody was saying, what planet did you grow up on?
That's a lot of people forget that those connections really do, there's systems like that, there's groups like that, and you have to, play by the rules in the field that you're playing, so to speak.
Right. And in a small town, the rules are different than in a big impersonal type of town. And chat with somebody that they felt like they really didn't want to have representing them if she was going to be kind of out of touch with reality.
Yeah, absolutely.
And she wasn't there after another couple terms. Don't know exactly how that happened, but anyway.
Yeah. So when you went to leave with your doctorate, what was your focus then? If you were working with a school board at the time, were you looking to teach or were you looking to manage? What were you looking to do?
Well, I was set up to be the fellowship I had. They taught us to be a researching administrator or a researching counselor so that I was heavily focused on doing research, and I worked in the school board in the research department for several years, and then a social service agency hired me to be an administrator and to run a major research grant that they had. And I did that for a number of years and kind of mixing between being an administrator and a researcher.
Right.
And then the University of Central Florida hired me to do computer support, but a lot of the computer support was to support faculty and students in doing research, doing the statistical analysis using the big boxes. And so that's what I did for a long time. I also taught during all that time. I was teaching courses for Nova and Rollins and one or two for University of Central Florida themselves. Mostly I was in the administrative side. I mean, universities are usually split between faculty and administration, and the computer center was in the administrative. So we ran the computers and the computer labs, and so I got heavily involved in Novell, local area networks, when they were the big thing.
So how did that happen? Because you said like one semester or 1 year of engineering. How did you get into computer support and just LAN networks?
In part of the research, and again we're talking, this was late 60s, to do statistics, you actually ended up writing your own programs. And so one of the courses that I had as part of my master's, is right after my bachelor's, was in computer programming. So I wrote my first computer program in Fortran back in 1967. And probably a lot of people listening here weren't even around in 67. And that got me interested in the computer side. And in research, there's always the statistics. And statistics, when I went to the school board, for example, the person that I replaced had done a study the year before, 8,000 students without a computer. So it was a matter of 8,000 surveys he went through and did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, how many said yes and how many said no?
Yeah.
Well, you can't do, Orange County at that point had 85,000 students. It's kind of hard to do serious research without a computer.
Right.
And at that time, again, we're talking 70s, what was then called the microcomputers weren't even around. So the mainframe was the only thing you could use. So I liked the computer work. Yeah. I enjoyed that. I enjoyed the challenge of it. I got really good at doing the statistical packages, and they got originally Biomed and then SAS and SPSS, big packages that were, you didn't have to write your own programs. You had to, set up it was originally cards and whatever in the proper format, and then it would run I remember it was funny because in the 30s and 40s, people would get a 6-month grant and hire a staff and rent a room and get a whole bunch of calculators in order to do a big statistical, for example, analysis of variance. And it would be something that I wonder what it would look like if we click, 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 boom. And 5 minutes later, we would have the same thing that it had taken them the better part of a year. Yeah. With a staff of 6 or 8 sitting there crunching away on calculators to do the work that you could do in literally minutes. And so I helped a lot of people set up their computer programs to run the statistical analysis on surveys of literally thousands of surveys and research projects over the decade I worked for University of Central Florida. And then I was doing software development as part of that, because there were little programs the university needed, and setting up the Novell networks. Because at that time, the PC actually worked better for students than a mainframe. And you wouldn't think so, but what happens on a mainframe is the pie is one size. And at the end of the term, when everybody is ready to use the computer, their slice gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, to where a 2-second job might take you 2 hours to get, where the PC runs slower, but it runs exactly the same speed at the end of the term that it did at the beginning of the term. So the 2-second job that takes 30 seconds on a PC, you got it back in 30 seconds rather than 2 hours.
Right.
And so we did a lot of moving off of mainframe onto what were, like I said, originally microcomputers and then personal computers.
So how did you learn those skills? Because you were teaching them, you were sharing them with others, but you went further than that, because I saw it was on your bio, I think, that you wrapped that into a regular column in Land magazine. You became the president of Novell's International User Group. But that was self-taught?
That's self-taught. That's one of the things I learned literally in high school, was that I could learn from books. And it really was different, computers in the 80s and 90s, in terms of you could read 2 or 3 books on Clipper, for example, was a language that DBase 3 and whatever, and know the field pretty well. And things have gotten much more complicated to where, but I have always been able to dive in and do self-taught to where I come out the other side feeling like I'm pretty competent, and other people would tell me I was pretty competent. It was interesting to me when I got into the internet marketing that I thought I would do that. And I dove in, and webinars and downloading ebooks and e-courses and all the other types of things. And after a year and a half, I realized this rabbit hole was not going to cycle. I was not going to come out the other side, because it just, between Kindle books and, I mean, I could go on with 50 different kinds. So
many different pieces to it.
Right. And it's constantly expanding, and we're constantly getting, I mean, I'm on a number of mailing lists, and I get every day, it seems like, brand new way to get traffic. You know, you've never seen this before. This is the way, and I will say this, to me, was funny, and I wrote a blog post on it a while back. In the 80s, in the computer industry, we had a saying, quick, cheap, good. Pick two.
Yeah.
In the 90s, it became pick one.
There's a version of that for dating too, but I won't say it on the recording.
Yep. But we get every day. For $27, you could be making money today.
Yep.
And so you can. It's quick, it's good, and it's cheap. All three. And every one of those, I have to now laugh, because the more I think about it, the more I think that's just, it was insane in the 80s when somebody said, I can really get you a dynamite thing. We can have it done in a week, and it'll only take half time from one of the people, good, quick, and cheap. But we all the time get these good, quick, and cheap solutions to making money forever on the internet, and that's BS.
Well, and it's true, though, because it can be good and cheap, but it's not going to be quick, or it can be, cheap and quick, but it's not going to be good. And
Exactly.
I think a good thing for people to do is to, as they're looking at different opportunities or tools or whatever it may be, is to ask that question of, is this good, is this quick, and is this, cheap? Is it 2 of the 3 or 3 of the 3? And kind of just in analyzing it. I mean, that's a very analytical way of doing it, which is very true to everything that you've done before.
Right.
But so skipping back a little bit, and I'll kind of skip through it because it seemed like a long story, but you wrote an unsolicited grant proposal to Novell, and Novell funded a LAN institute, a local area network institute at the University of Central Florida, which you were the director.
Right.
But then what happened?
Basically, the CEO who I had been working with retired, and the new people looked and said, we can give away copies, $4,000 copies of the network, and it cost us like $50, but we can write it off tax right for $4,000, or we can give $100,000 to this institute that's working. And so they decided that it was a whole lot easier and cheaper for them to not do the institute anymore.
Yeah.
And we had been working to get some funding from other places and whatever, and for a number of various reasons that didn't happen. And so the institute basically closed its doors after a couple of years. So we did some good work while we were there, but industry changed.
Yeah. And so, pretty quickly you were without a job.
I was.
And so what was the worst moment in that kind of like period of uncertainty? If you had something that did you think that it was certain before, or were you kind of looking for something else, or was that just a punch in the face to make you realize?
It was a punch in the face in terms of I was expecting some of the internet, the networking. At that point, we're talking network like Novell,
right.
The local area networking was going to generate, and I got some consulting jobs from it and whatever, but it never took off for me personally the way I had thought that it would, the way I was aiming for it to. And so I did a lot of consulting, and consulting is an interesting field. It's feast or famine. Yep. And you end up working your tail off. And I never really was super good about balancing. I'm really working for this person, but I need to carve off a little bit of time to be getting the next people. Yep. When I get into a project, I'm in it, and it could be 60, 80 hours a week. And when that wrapped up,
I've done that as well before too. And it's like, you have a job and you're working on that job, and then the job ends and you're like, oh crap, I need to find a new one. And then you find it, and then it's just this, and your income stress and everything else is like this.
Yep. And you want to hire people, but then you realize that you're going to be the same cycle. I'll give you an example which tickled me when I finally figured it out. I wondered why some of the interstate sections, and you're wondering where this is going, but why they took so long to complete. And a friend of mine who worked in that industry said they bid certain sections on a 15-year finish, and the big companies will hire at a break even, or bid at break even or even a little bit of a loss, because it gives them a place to put their crews in between the other big jobs. So they know that it's going to take 10 years to finish this 5-mile section.
Yep.
But it gives them, so when they're doing that feast or famine for their crew of 100 people plus 2 bulldozers that are costing, they cost them $500,000, they're making payments they've got a place to send those people to work, so they don't have to lay them off or furlough them or whatever, or pay them for doing nothing.
Right.
So it was they're trying to level out that famine for their construction.
Kind of smart, but also ridiculous at the same time.
Yep.
So in that transition, how did you go from losing your job and just that hit in the face of needing to find something new? How did you find network marketing?
Well, network marketing came to me. Somebody prospected me at that point, and that was for the big company that's still around. And I really got hooked on the idea of residual income. I will say that the face-to-face, belly-to-belly type of network marketing, once I'd finished chasing my friends and family, didn't work for me. And partly as systems analyst, software developer, even in the university, I didn't have a lot of clients coming through my door. There wasn't a large group of people that I was associating with that I could go talk to. So the friends and family type things to chase was relatively limited, and I went through them, and I went through them again, and I got out of the one company after 6 years, and later I got into another one, which I really liked because the way it was set up, and we won't name names and whatever, but the compensation plan was designed to where everybody in the upline is getting 100% of the volume. Therefore, anybody is willing to help you, because if you take off and do a lot, they will benefit, even though you're 15 levels, 20 levels, 100 levels deeper. And I liked that.
Yeah. And in your first company, you were there for 6 years. It was in your bio, you said that it wasn't the vehicle for you. You realized that residual income was what you were looking for, but that wasn't the vehicle. So how did you determine that? How did you feel about that? Like, what made you make the decision did you look elsewhere, or did you just quit and something else came to you?
It was one of those things that faded. Mm-hmm. And I have since, I had a feeling at that time, if I can't make it, how can I look at other people in the eye and say, you can make it? Ray Higdon took me to task on that a while back and said, the fact that you weren't making it doesn't mean that the next person that you talk to isn't going to be the one that makes it. And so I had kind of a turnaround in that thought. But a lot of it was, at that time, I put a lot of energy into it. I showed the plan a lot. I put a lot of people in. And I have a real ethical problem with some of the folks whose attitude is what churn and burn. I know this person won't make it, but they've got a list, and if I just get them in long enough to get their list, then they know somebody. Yeah. And if I'm going to talk to you about an opportunity that can change your life, if I don't believe that you have got what it takes to do that, and there are people who just don't have the motivation, they don't have the drive, they don't have any interest. And I might be able to jack them up enough to get them over the hurdle to at least talking to me and giving me their list, but I have a hard time ethically doing that. Yeah,
and I've seen people do that before, and the way that people think about someone else when they do that is just very, it's like using people as a commodity. But at the same time, similar in structure is that if you have someone that you're like, all right, I'm not sure about this person, but I'm excited, and they do know people, they have a list of people. You talked about it before, of the next person could be the person that takes off. And right. I've seen people before that, you don't think that they're going to be a big networker, but they go through and they talk to, I think, my favorite story, and it's completely, not ordinary. But he talked to two people, both signed up, and both had massive organizations, and he pretty much never did anything else. And he makes 5 figures a month doing nothing because he found 2 people and he had a 100% success rate, and he didn't want to do anything else, and he walked away. But he still makes the check. But that doesn't always happen, and
it's very rare.
Very rare, yeah. But what did you learn? Because you had your background in education, and you have a background in teaching people and educating. So how did that influence your decision to move to a different company?
Well, I ended up spending several years after the first company looking to build a residual income by building small businesses into large ones to where it would, that also wasn't working for me. And it's a matter of picking the right industry and the right time. One of the companies, just various things happened. Just one of them, for example, we were working with a product called CATIA, which is a very, very high-end CAD CAM, $18,000 a seat to build 3-dimensional models of, and the company that owned it decided that they didn't want small vendors anymore. They wanted just to work with Rand and IBM and change the rules, and suddenly we were totally out of business, even though we had been doing a good job and had a good customer base and were growing steadily. And it would have been a company that we could have sold for a good profit, but it just went away because of a change in 14 levels higher than we were.
Right.
And so at that point, I'm still looking at residual income, and I got in this other company, and I really, really like the company. I really, really respect them. But after a while, it became the same belly-to-belly 3-foot rule. How do we prospect people? And that's when I decided it was time to go online and use the skills I had in computers. I learned very quickly that while I had lots of skills in computers, marketing was not something I knew much about. And I didn't know how little I knew about it until I dove in that internet marketing rabbit hole and finally found a mentor, a trainer, a system that I really believe in. And since then, things have been going a whole lot better.
Yeah. And so, you talked about it before. You dove in and kind of just weren't expecting what you got. And I guess the best metaphor is that you dove in and didn't realize there was, an undercurrent. And you're kept down there for a while. So, you talked about it a little bit of like you had similar challenges building an MLM business for the second time. But internet marketing, for anyone who's ever done it, I'm pretty sure that everybody will agree, is that everybody gets sucked in that undercurrent. Like there's so much. There's a million pieces to every one thing.
Right.
Each piece is really usually pretty simple, but having a cohesive working whole is very, very difficult to manage. So when you first got in and kind of, felt that pressure of, wow, this is a lot, what did you do? How did you react to that?
Well, I kept feeling like, for years, and I mentioned CATIA. CATIA is huge. I dove in, and after a year, came out the other side where every course I took, every book I read, I knew most of it. I was getting a nugget, but I knew most of it. And it's what I call, it wraps on itself. Mm-hmm. I had basically closed the loop. Yes, there were things I could learn, but I had the foundation. The internet marketing field, I dove in, and the loop never closed. As I said, to me, it was like a rabbit hole, except there were new tunnels and new pieces, and it just went. And I finally said,
more loops are opened than are closed.
Exactly. Yeah. And I finally kind of climbed out of the hole and said, this is never going to close. One person cannot learn all of these. I need to find. And it really came out and said, I need to find a mentor, I need to find a mastermind group, and I need to find a training system that goes from beginning to end. Because partly what I was discovering, and anybody who's been in internet marketing will nod their head at this, is 99% of the training you get is disguised sales pitches. Yeah. You're getting a little piece in order to get you to take the course. But even when you took the course, there are people, and again, I won't name names, but there are people who teach blogging. There are people who teach solo eds. There are people who teach PPC. There are people who teach, well, all of those are just little niches. And you need a whole series of niches together in order to do a complete sales funnel, to have a complete system of any kind. I mean, right now I'm focusing on list building, but I have gone through the finding niches, finding a USP, building a home base, building an authority base, a blog system. But so many of the trainers are teaching their one little narrow focus. There's a guy I know who's fantastic at teaching the phone. The phone is only one little tiny piece of the whole thing. And so you need somebody who's interested in teaching the whole thing. And that can be in their course or one-on-one or whatever, but somebody has to, you have to figure out the whole. I mean, I've got several things I've created, graphics and whatever. And one of my favorites is have an automobile with wings and a propeller and tank treads.
Yep.
And when I tried to take the pieces I had learned from various people and put them together, that's what I got.
I like
it isn't a good car, it isn't a good plane, and it isn't a tank. But that's what I got from all these other people.
Yeah.
And and I also have a PowerPoint slide that has, I think, 80 things that fly in between viral traffic and blogging and just all these rabbit holes we were talking about. Yeah. And I had realized I'd had a webinar or an e-course on every last one of those and still couldn't put together a sales funnel.
Yeah. And you have to, I mean, you can't, you can do anything if you stop trying to do everything. And, it's like the education is out there, but there's so much of it and it's changing, especially on the web. You have to learn to manage your time and sort and decide, because if you do a webinar that's, it's only $9 and it's going to teach me how to build a list, but it's actually a sales pitch for a thing that's $200 and takes you 2 months to learn, it doesn't work because of time, because of involvement, because you're learning a lot of one piece. Did you do any outsourcing at all or work with other people? Did that, become an option for you?
I have done some outsourcing. Right at this point, I pulled back from that because what I'm doing is still in-house. What I will say, I mean, since you have a focus for all these podcasts, is what I realized a couple months ago was that I could use a lot of this internet marketing material. And so one of my websites I set up with squeeze page, ebook, advertising, but I'm teaching people how to do network marketing in the 21st century, which is the title of one of my, and so that I can attract people. And it just, to me, I have no problem at all contacting somebody who's downloaded an ebook whose title is Network Marketing in the 21st Century. This is not a cold call. They've already said network marketing is something I'm interested in. And so making that phone call is a breeze compared to, let me call somebody I haven't seen. I mean, I had my 50th high school graduation, Cardi recently, and it's like some of these people I haven't seen since then, and I could go talk to him and offer him my opportunity. I don't think so.
and you talked about it before, saying the internet allows us to find people that are searching for what we already have. So
exactly.
You add value with these ebooks and these different systems, and I saw one. I think it was in the sidebar currently on your site, but I'm going to link a few of them below this post. But you offer value and then you create a relationship, because I know this about you, and I don't want people to confuse that, is that it's not they download an ebook and you call them and prospect them. It's you call and build a relationship with them, and what happens. Sometimes they're interested and sometimes they're not. So I was like, what's the difference between finding and convincing? Like, how would you determine that?
Well, partly what I'm doing with this is creating a lead co-op. Okay. To where, for a lot of people who were doing network marketing, they hit the same brick wall of who do I talk to? Yep. And so when I can offer people, we will share the cost. I'm not going to go out and find all the leads, at my own expense, but I'm not making any money off of it. But I will help you find leads, and I will train you on how to deal with those leads. So I'm mostly targeting people who have tried, liked it, but ran into the brick wall of who do I talk to? I don't have qualified leads to talk to anymore, and I'm not willing to go back through my list for the fourth time, the fifth time. I have relatives who aren't speaking to me now, and so that to me, I'm looking for people who are hungry,
Mm-hmm.
who have been there, done that, and if they could find qualified people to talk to, they would be really, really happy to jump on board. And so in that case, I don't have to convince. It's just, okay, this is what I'm offering. If you're ready for this, let's go.
Right.
And people who are at that point say, oh, yes, this I'm willing to try. And we can't guarantee success for anybody, but it certainly is a whole different thing when we have basically an unlimited pool of prospects who are somewhat interested in what we're talking about to work from. So those, I'm not having to convince people if that's it. Now, you do have to go through some people, because we get a lot of people who download the ebook who, for whatever reason, don't really know what they weren't there. I don't know why they downloaded it.
Right. I've had someone respond to me before. I think my son, like my 9-year-old son, did it. I'm like, I'm pretty sure your 9-year-old son didn't find a form and download it to learn more about a business opportunity, but that's just a hunch.
Yes, just a hunch that it probably didn't happen. And I actually had one lady who said, well, I'm not real sure. I'm supposed to download them, sign up and download them all. And I suspect one of the solo ads I bought that somebody is somehow or other paying the people to do the clicks and the downloads to get the numbers so that he can look good. Yeah. And I suspect I know who it is because I track that kind of thing. But that was just an interesting. You're supposed to. Wait a minute. This isn't the way from my end how it's supposed to work. You're supposed to download it because you're interested in it, not because somebody's paying you to. But the industry's got its dark side that you got to watch too.
Yeah. And how have you? You talk about a dark side, and when I was in high school, I had a little business where I would deliver food during study hall. And, I was always trying to look for the good in people. And, every once in a while I'd get an IOU that didn't get returned. And I didn't go as far as to hire thugs to get my money back for the candy bar, but would have been a good idea. But how have people received you giving value to them, and how have they seen that? Because you're just out to help people grow, and that's how your business works. That's how you structured it. But how have people responded to that?
Most people are very appreciative. We build a relationship. There's a friendship that happens out of that. I try and be very transparent. I am who I am. I have also learned, we were talking, for example, Diane Hockman earlier and some others. Kennedy is one that comes, the quote, if you haven't pissed somebody off before lunch, you're not trying hard enough. I try and be me, and that will turn some people off, and other people will resonate very well. Because we've got a saying in attraction marketing, if you're trying to market to everybody, you're marketing to nobody. Yeah. And so the whole objective here is to find a group of people who resonate with the person I am, with the background I have, with the system I'm developing, the ethics I have, whatever you want to. One of the things that as I've studied this, I really came to believe and do believe strongly, we cannot assess products and companies very well. The data is, everybody says they have the best company, the best comp plan, the best products, and they have data to prove it, more or less. We are very, very good at, I like this person, or I don't, or I feel uncomfortable. I was just reading a book not too long ago called Younger Next Year, and it's talking about how our body, if we just sit on the couch, it degrades. But if the body is, it's springtime, you're out, you're active, it's time to increase the immune system, build a muscle, get rid of fat, and all that type of thing. But part of what he said that they found with the functional MRIs that we now have that our processing center for our eyes is huge. And the scientists were saying, I wonder why this is, because our eyes are not that good compared to, say, a hawk.
Right.
They can see a mouse moving from 5,000 feet. And what they found was with these functional MRIs, if I'm just moving around the room, only a little fraction of that supercomputer fires up. And when I start looking at people, the whole thing rumbles into motion, because we are very, very good at, the eye twitch, the mouth twitch, the head cocked, the eyes rolled. We're picking up a huge amount of information from watching the people. We collect, and I had read before that 80% of the communication is not verbal.
Yep.
But I hadn't really processed that. And so what I'm applying all this to close that loop is that we are good at saying, I resonate with this person, I trust this person, I know, like, and trust. And that becomes the basis on which, if this person likes the company, if this person likes the product, if this person is telling me this is a good, we can work together, and I like the person, then the decision's made. Where if I have to assess, getting the financials on the 5 biggest network marketing companies in the country and getting the chemical analysis of their products and seeing whether these nutraceuticals that they're selling, which, there's no studies that I know of where they've compared the supplements.
They're all independently the best according to their data, and that makes it hard to evaluate opportunities.
Right.
You have to go on people's word a lot of the times. So, you talk about, reading people, and I have a huge affinity for reading body language and practice constantly, and have a few good stories when I was right and a few when I was wrong. But when you're talking about internet marketing and you're talking about getting into it, I guess, what would you say to someone who's trying to figure out how to grow their business through the internet? So they have a network marketing business, they're trying to grow their business through the internet, but you really, you had really 2 distinct focuses. One was creating value, an ebook, product, a sales funnel, whatever it may be, and giving value to others. And then the other was to work those leads. So how does that play together? Does everybody need to create something that offers value, or is there another way to do it to attract the people to your business?
For me, either you do it or you hook up with somebody who's doing it. That for me made the most sense. There are people doing it with Facebook and adding value that way, and creating. I have a hard time with that. I understand it here. I don't totally understand it here. And part of my personality, I'm on Facebook all the time in some closed groups where the mastermind that I was talking about, we're working. I'm not on my news feed that much, and I really don't care that you went to the coffee shop this morning. And, looking at the pictures of 2,000 people's kids I don't get much value out of that.
Right.
And so it's very hard for me my personality and whatever, I'm basically an introvert. Yeah. I am outgoing on the internet. I'm outgoing in helping people, but I'm not. I was laughing, one of the people who teaches Facebook, and we were talking, you're at a coffee shop and somebody comes in, do you smile? Just come sit, let's chat. He's like, no, I don't. And I don't think I will. It's not who I am. Why is that? What's the purpose of that conversation?
Right.
If they look like they're starving to death and they're coming in to get out of the cold, I may reach out to help. But just let's have a conversation just because I'm sitting here not doing anything. No, I probably got a book with me, or these days it's an iPad with a book on it, and so I'm just not going to. The extrovert wants to talk to everybody about anything. The introvert doesn't so much.
So you're
So
an
it's
analog introvert and a digital extrovert.
yep, and what I call a situational extrovert.
Okay.
Because I mean, I go to workshops with, and people say, "Well, you're not an extrovert because you're here. You're one of the leaders. We can see you," and I'm in my environment. And the Myers-Briggs test of personality. One of the things she said, which I thought was very, very true, that when you get an introvert into an area that he's passionate about, they're indistinguishable from an extrovert.
Yep.
And her example was the kid who likes remote control planes. And you get him in the club where everybody's got a remote control plane, and he's talking about his new plane and the new, and you cannot tell that this is an introvert.
I had an ex-girlfriend that was like that, not with remote
Yep.
controlled planes.
Yeah. but you put them in another club, and they're totally in the corner,
Yep.
being quiet, observing, in some cases wondering, why am I here? I mean, I used to still do go to networking meetings in Orlando, and it was 6 months before I answered the question of why am I here? Because I would sit and look and watch the people give their 30-second. I would give my 30-second. And
Is
it was
it
like,
B&I?
I was in some B&I.
Yep.
I didn't. There were some others that I liked better than B&I, but yes, B&I type of groups.
I
And
did
it was
that
just
for like 3 years, all in-person networking groups, like 5 a week.
right.
And it gets overwhelming even as an extrovert, and it's a lot. So
Yeah.
so speaking of rabbit holes that are drowning and you get stuck in them. So what would you, I guess, for like an action item, what would you say that, to someone who's dove into internet marketing and they've gotten caught in the undertow or they're stuck in the rabbit hole, what would you say would be an action item for them to help evaluate their next steps?
Well, part of it, at some point, you have to back out and look at what's going on and assess.
Mm-hmm.
Am I making progress? Where am I going? As I said, my final decision was I needed to find a mentor, a training system,
Yep.
a mastermind group. I found one. We're not mentioning names, so I'll. I want to say it in the worst way, but it's you need to look for somebody who is teaching that you can hook onto. So much of what I ended up with were these either weekend workshops or classes, and they would have one follow-up, maybe two follow-ups, 2 weeks later. Well, I wasn't ready for the follow-up when they were, either I was done or I wasn't to the point yet.
Right.
You need something that's ongoing where you can build a relationship with the person and ask questions when you need to ask the questions. And it might be, all of us life gets in the way. And so that 2-day project sometimes is a month.
Yeah.
And so when you're finally ready and you're stuck, you need to have someone where you can reach out and say, hey, this doesn't seem to be working the way I thought it would. Can you show me where I went wrong, or give me what can I do to improve this? And that type of relationship with some type of system, to me, there are very, very few people who did it on their own. Almost everyone that I've talked to, sometimes over a beer, I didn't really get any traction until I hooked up with, and they'll mention their mentor. Right. And it has to be kind of an ongoing relationship, whether it's a paid consulting one-on-one, or there are some people doing some training, some long-term, and they have Facebook groups that the turn into mastermind groups where you can ask questions and your peers will answer. And when you get enough peers, somebody will have a good answer for whatever you're stuck on.
Yeah.
So
it's kind of the information of the collective. Yeah.
And so it really, what I would say to them, the main thing is you can't do this alone. You just, that was my solution. And there were so many things over the years that I could do alone. I could learn enough. I've been considered an expert in 10 or 20 fields that I did self-study. Internet marketing was not one of them. And I'll confess that straight up, that I just thrashed. and thrashed, and realized I was going to thrash forever unless I really found something to help me get through some of that. And there aren't the books anymore. The whole world has changed in terms of where, I can't program anymore. I don't hardly program at all, but I can't do it without Google. Because when you need what are the commands for that? We do HTML, even if you don't.
Oh, I do the same thing. I'm like, Google, what's the HTML for? And then
right,
regular search.
Yep. And it used to be that you had one or two books, and those were your references, and everything that there was to know, that you needed was in those couple of books. Yep. Tain't that way anymore.
Well, thank you so much. I mean, it's the insight of kind of how things have changed and how you've adapted to them and what you've accomplished from that is amazing, but also super helpful to anyone listening, because so often people get into internet marketing, they get overwhelmed, and they give up. Rather than reassess and take a different path, they give up. And that's not good. And so I think that your story will definitely help them to realize how they can do that. And thank you so much for coming on. We're going to have the link to the podcast below, and the link to your website and all of your ebooks and more resources. Thank you.
You're very, very welcome. Enjoyed it.